What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. It is Wednesday, so as you know, we have already dropped the wide receiver rankings here for week 3. Today, right now, we are going to be doing the running back rankings, so we'll go through my top 36 guys. As always, make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. That way you never miss any future content. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video, and let's start talking about these week 3 running backs. So as you can see, I have the tier maker pulled up on the screen. We have 7 tiers to get through all 36 running backs, but we will be starting in tier 1 with my running back 1. This is the elite RB1 tier, and that is Breece Hall of the New York Jets. Now, he plays against the New England Patriots here this week. Last week, he rushed for 14 times for 64 yards while catching 7 of 8 targets for 52 yards and a touchdown in Sunday's 24-17 win over the Titans. Breece, he continues to be a beast in the receiving game, giving us a very safe floor in PPR leagues. And Braylon Allen, he will not always be the one taking away the touchdowns, so don't overthink it. Coming in as my running back 2, this is where I'm going to have Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. He plays against the Kansas City Chiefs, and he rushed 14 times for 97 yards and brought in 4 of 5 targets for 25 yards in the Falcons' 22-21 win over the Eagles on Monday night. Now, this week's matchup against the Kansas City defense, it is the toughest matchup that Bijan has had yet, but this is going to be a player that's going to continue performing for our fantasy football teams, and he still hasn't found the end zone in 2024, so you know that's coming. He is my running back 2 here in week 3. Now, moving on to my running back 3, that is going to be Saquon Barkley of the Philadelphia Eagles. He plays on the road at the New Orleans Saints, and Barkley, he's rushed 22 times for 95 yards and caught 4 of 5 targets for 21 yards in Monday's 22-21 loss over Atlanta. Saquon, he had a game-costing drop in this one on 3rd down in the 4th quarter, and that would have sealed the game for the Philadelphia Eagles, but Saquon, he's averaged 25-plus opportunities every week so far this year, and he is a set-it-and-forget-it RB1. Now, moving on to my running back 4, this is where I'm going to put Jordan Mason of the San Francisco 49ers. He plays on the road at the Los Angeles Rams, and Mason took 20 carries for 100 yards and a rushing touchdown while bringing in his lone target for 4 yards in Sunday's 23-17 loss to the Minnesota Vikings. Mason, he's being used as a bell cow in CMC's absence. He's accounted for 98% of the team's rushing attempts. With Deebo Samuel out and no longer taking some of the rushing attempts and the goal line work, Mason should have a top 3 ceiling here this week against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, moving on to my number 5 running back, this is where I'm going to have Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. He plays against the Philadelphia Eagles, and Kamara, he carried the ball 20 times for 115 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also caught 2 of his 3 targets for 65 yards and a 4th touchdown in Sunday's 44-19 win over the Cowboys. Kamara now has 2 finishes in the top 10 at the position, and he looks like one of the better value picks managers could have made in drafts so far this year. Don't always expect 4 touchdowns, but expect lots more fantasy points for fantasy managers here in week 3. Now let's move on to my tier 2. Tier 2 is the high-end running back ones. Coming in at running back 6, this is where I'm going to put Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. He plays against the Chicago Bears, and Taylor rushed 12 times for 103 yards and brought in 2 of 4 targets for 32 yards in the Colts' 16-10 loss to the Packers on Sunday. Now, Taylor, he's not seeing the rushing volume that he's seen in past years, and that was always kind of the worry with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. However, despite the lower volume, he's still accounting for about 93.3% of the Colts' rushing attempts, and he still should be considered a running back 1 each and every week. Now, moving on to my running back 7, this is where I'm going to put Achane for the Miami Dolphins. He plays on the road at the Seattle Seahawks, and Achane rushed 22 times for 96 yards and secured all 7 targets for 69 yards and a touchdown in the Dolphins' 31-10 loss to the Bills on Thursday night. It's going to be risky with Tua out of the lineup for the next couple of weeks, but Achane should still have a very safe floor in this offense. He is seeing a heavy workload on the ground. He's seeing a 19.2% target share receiving. Those 2 things, they give him an elite ceiling each and every week. Now, moving on to my running back 8, this is where I'm going to put Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. He plays on the road at the Arizona Cardinals, and Gibbs rushed 13 times for 84 yards and caught all 7 of his targets for 22 yards in Sunday's 20-16 loss to the Buccaneers. Gibbs continues to be a key part of this Lions offense, and he continues to do his damage in the receiving game with 13 targets over his last 2 games. This matchup against Arizona should be very high scoring. It should be fast-paced, so expect a little bit more of the same from Gibbs here in week 3. Now let's move on to my tier 3. Tier 3 is going to be those low-end running back ones. I'm going to start off with running back 9, Derrick Henry. He plays against the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. Henry rushed 18 times for 84 yards and a touchdown, and he secured his only target for 12 yards in the Ravens' 26-23 loss to the Raiders on Sunday. Henry saw the rushing attempts increase in week 2 and is the guaranteed goal line back here in this offense. Dallas hasn't been great against the running backs, and they just gave up 4 touchdowns to Alvin Kamara. Kamara. Henry may not do that. That's probably not going to be the expectation, but he should have a decent matchup here in week 3. Now moving on to my running back 10, this is where I'm going to have James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. He plays against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Cook rushed 11 times for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns and secured his only target for a 17-yard score in the Bills' 31-10 win over the Dolphins on Thursday night. 3 touchdowns is not always going to be the norm for James Cook, but he is seeing a healthy workload both on the ground and in the air, and he should still be considered a must-start in Week 3 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Moving on to my running back 11, this is where I'm going to put Josh Jacobs of the Green Bay Packers. He plays on the road at the Tennessee Titans. Jacobs rushed 32 times for 151 yards in the Packers' 16-10 win over the Colts on Sunday. He also lost a fumble, but Jacobs has 51 opportunities through his first 2 games as a Packer. He is yet to find the end zone, but he has 3 attempts within the 5 zone, so it's bound to happen soon. This week's matchup against Tennessee, who currently ranks 22nd against running backs, should give him a good chance to do it. Now moving on to my running back 12, this is where I'm going to put Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He plays on the road at the Buffalo Bills. Etienne, he rushed the ball 13 times for 52 yards and a touchdown in Sunday's 18-13 loss to the Browns. He added 3 receptions on 4 targets for 6 yards, and we've yet to see Etienne finish as a running back 1 this year, but week 3 against Buffalo should help him step in the right direction. Etienne also has 2 touchdowns through 2 weeks, and it looks like he's going to be Jacksonville's goal line back for the majority of the season. Now moving on to my running back 13, this is where I'm going to put James Conner, and he is the last guy in tier 3. He plays against a tough defense in Detroit there. That is the Detroit Lions. Now obviously the Arizona Cardinals, they are going to be at home. Last week, Conner, he took 21 carries, 422 yards and a touchdown while collecting his lone target for 2 yards in Sunday's blowout 41-10 win over the Rams. 2 weeks into the year, and we already have 2 running back 1 finishes for Conner in a very different game script in each of those games. As long as Conner is healthy, he is going to be used heavily in this offense, and he will always have touchdown upside around the goal line. This matchup is much tougher than his first 2 games, but he should still be left in your starting lineups. Now let's move on to my tier 4. Tier 4 is going to be those safe running back 2s. Coming in as my running back 14, this is going to be Rachaad White. He plays against the Denver Broncos, and White sustained a groin injury during Sunday's 20-16 win over the Lions, rushing just 10 times for 18 yards while securing his only target for 5 yards. It sounds like the groin injury for White isn't going to be a big issue, but what we don't want to see is White lose additional work to Bucky because of it. This matchup against Denver should be a positive game script for White and give him a chance to find the end zone too. Now moving on to my running back 15, this is where I'm going to have David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. Like I mentioned, they play on the road at the Arizona Cardinals. Montgomery, he rushed 11 times for 35 yards and a touchdown while catching all 4 of his targets for 35 yards in Sunday's 20-16 loss to the Buccaneers. Now Montgomery, he continues to give us this safe floor with plenty of goal line carries in this offense, but he doesn't have the elite ceiling due to his lack of involvement in the receiving game. This week should be more of the same versus the Arizona Cardinals, and he definitely is a safe running back to play. Now moving on to my running back 16, this is where I'm going to put Brian Robinson Jr. of the Washington Commanders. He plays on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals, and Robinson carried the ball 17 times for 133 yards in Sunday's 21-18 win over the Giants, and now he has been sneakily productive in fantasy despite the Commanders' offensive woes. He has 2 top 12 finishes and is being used in the receiving game as well. It's been very sneaky for fantasy football, and he should be a more than safe play here in week 3 against Cincinnati, even if Washington is an 8-point underdog. Now coming in at my running back 17, this is where I'm going to put Tony Pollard of the Tennessee Titans. He plays against the Green Bay Packers, and Pollard rushed 17 times for 62 yards and secured 5 of 6 targets for 40 yards in the Titans' 24-17 loss to the Jets on Sunday. Pollard, he has looked much better than he looked in 2023. He's seeing a 76.7% of the Titans' rushing attempts and a whopping 18.5% target share in the air. This type of volume will continue producing fantasy football points for us, and it will continue against a soft Packers defense that currently ranks 28th against running backs. Now moving on to my running back 18, this is where I'm going to put Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. They play against the San Francisco 49ers, and Williams, he rushed 12 times for 25 yards and a touchdown while catching 4 of 5 targets for 27 yards in Sunday's 41-10 loss to the Cardinals. We haven't seen the elite ceiling from Kyren Williams in 2024 that we saw in 2023 yet. However, this Rams line is in shambles, and as long as they're banged up and without their top receiving options on offense, teams are going to continue to stack the box against Kyren Williams, especially teams as good as the San Francisco 49ers are on the defensive line. And now coming in at my running back 19, this is where I'm going to put Joe Mixon of the Houston Texans. And hear me out, Mixon was injured during Sunday's win and returned to the game, but he just played 7 snaps upon his return. The running back underwent an MRI on Monday, and head coach DeMeco Ryans was very non-committal to Mixon's week 3 status. So the reason why I have him him here at 19 is because I am not necessarily expecting him to play. It is still in question. That is why I've moved him down my rankings just in case he does play. Keep an eye out. Like I mentioned, go join the Discord. There is a Discord linked in the description. I'm going to be changing this throughout the week based on the practice reports, but this is somebody that we should be keeping an eye on as those practice reports come out this week. Now, moving on to my tier 5. Tier 5 is going to be those fringe running back 2s. Coming in as my running back 20, I do have Zach Charbonnet versus the Miami Dolphins. Now, Charbonnet, he rushed 14 times for 38 yards and a touchdown, and he caught all 5 targets for 31 yards in Sunday's 23-20 overtime win versus the New England Patriots. And Charbonnet, he filled in nicely for Walker as the starter last week, and he should do the same thing here again this week, as the Seahawks have mentioned that they'd like to take things slow with their starter in Kenneth Walker. Now, I'm projecting Charbonnet to start again, but keep an eye on those practice reports as well, because if Walker plays, Charbonnet will definitely be moving down my rankings. Now, moving on to my running back 21, this is where I'm going to put Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. He plays against the New York Jets on the road there in New York. Stevenson rushed the ball 21 times for 81 yards and a touchdown in Sunday's 23-20 overtime loss to the Seahawks. He added 2 receptions on 5 targets for 9 yards, and Stevenson has outperformed expectations early on, with the Patriots being better than expected on offense, with Stevenson seeing a significantly healthy workload in the receiving game. Now, that said, this Jets defense looks to be worse than expected, and Ramondre should continue to perform at this type of level for fantasy managers here in week 3. Now, moving on to my running back 22. 22 is going to be Zach Moss of the Bengals. He plays against the Washington Commanders, and Moss rushed 12 times for 34 yards and brought in his only target for 13 yards in Sunday's 26-25 loss to the Chiefs. Moss has worked now as the lead back in his first 2 games for the Bengals, and he's had 2 tough defenses to start the year. I expect him to have a solid outing here in week 3 versus the Commanders, with the Bengals projected to be playing with a lead for the majority of the night. Now, moving on to my running back 23, this is where I'm going to put Aaron Jones of the Minnesota Vikings. He plays against the Houston Texans, and Jones rushed 9 times for 32 yards and secured 5 of his 6 targets for 36 yards in the Vikings' 23-17 upset win over the San Francisco 49ers on Sunday. Now, he also lost a fumble in this game, but Jones has been efficient with his opportunities, and he's being used in the receiving game, but he is splitting a decent amount of work on the ground with Ty Chandler. It is capping his overall upside. This week's matchup against Houston is also very tough, so he does come in for me as this safe running back 2, low-end running back 2, however you want to view it, but overall my running back 23. Now, coming in at my running back 24 and the last running back here in this tier, it is going to be J.K. Dobbins of the Los Angeles Chargers. He plays on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Dobbins rushed 17 times for 131 yards and a touchdown, bringing in his only target for no gain in the Chargers' 26-3 win over the Panthers on Sunday. Now, we knew somebody was going to be valuable in this Jim Harbaugh, in this Greg Roman rushing offense, but now, through 2 weeks, Dobbins has finished as a top 5 running back twice. This week versus Pittsburgh, it's going to be much tougher than the previous matchups for Dobbins. He had the Raiders, he had the Panthers. Those are a little bit easier matchups than what you got here in Pittsburgh, but Dobbins, he should still be a must-play as long as he's putting up numbers like this. Now, moving on to my tier 6 here, this is the low upside running back 3s. Coming in at running back 25, I do have Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As I mentioned, they play the Los Angeles Chargers, but Harris, he rushed the ball 17 times for 69 yards in Sunday's 13-6 win over the Broncos. He added 1 reception on 2 targets for 5 yards, and he's kind of been floating around that low-end RB2 territory for the last 2 weeks. But that being said, he has seen a heavy workload with an average of 20-plus opportunities per game. I think if Harris is going to have a big week, he needs to find the end zone, and that would require Justin Fields to kick this offense into the next gear, and that may not happen this week against the Chargers in a very slow-paced game. Now, moving on to my running back 26, this is where I have DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. He plays against the Indianapolis Colts there on the road. Swift ran the ball 14 times for 18 yards, and he caught 4 of 5 targets for 24 yards in Sunday's primetime loss to the Texans. This Bears offense has been severely underperforming to start the year, and because of that, Swift, he's kind of floated around this RB3 territory over his first 2 games. The usage is there for Swift. He has seen 77.4% of the rushing attempts here in Chicago, but the Bears, they're going to have to improve offensively before we have much confidence in starting DeAndre Swift for fantasy football. Now, moving on to my running back 27, this is where I'm going to have Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns. He plays against the New York Giants, and Ford rushed the ball 7 times for 64 yards in Sunday's 18-13 win over the Jaguars. He added 1 reception on 2 targets for 0 yards as well. First 2 games have kind of been the tale of 2 different stories for Ford. In a negative game script in week 1, Ford saw 19 opportunities and he finished as a top 15 running back. In a positive game script in week 2, he saw 9 opportunities and he finished as the running back back 35. We're going to have to keep an eye on this moving forward, but I'm nervous this week with the Browns projected to be in a positive game script against the Giants. Now, coming in at my running back 28, this is where I'm going to have Jahmyr White of the Las Vegas Raiders. They play against that Carolina Panthers defense, and White, he rushed 9 times for 24 yards. He secured 3 of 4 targets for 14 yards in the Raiders' 26-23 win over the Ravens on Sunday. And Jahmyr White, he's failed to crack the top 36 at the running back position so far this year, but this week's matchup versus Carolina, it should be very easy sledding for the Raiders. White, who's been splitting time with Madison early on this year, should have some touchdown potential against a Carolina team that's been getting blown out left and right to start the season. Now, moving on to my running back 29, I do have Devin Singletary of the New York Giants here. As I mentioned, they play on the road at the Cleveland Browns. Singletary, he carried the ball for 16 times and 95 yards and a touchdown in Sunday's 21-18 loss to the Commanders. He also caught his only target for 0 yards. But Singletary, he's finished as an RB3 or better in both of his first 2 games as a Giant, and we should continue to be able to lean on that volume. But this week's defense against the Cleveland Browns, it should be much tougher than what he saw last week, so let's temper those expectations. Now, moving on to my running back 30, this is where I'm going to put Austin Eckler, and he is the last guy here in this tier. He plays on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals, and Eckler, he's carried the ball 8 times for 38 yards, and he caught all 3 of his targets for 47 yards in Sunday's 21-18 win over the Giants. Now, Eckler, he's finished as a running back 3 or better in both of his last 2 matchups. The majority of the reason why is because he is a legit receiving threat in this offense. He's commanded a 13.2% target share, and this does give him a lot of PPR upside. This week versus Cincinnati, the Commanders, they are going to be in a negative game script. They are projected to lose by quite a lot, so that does mean a lot more receiving opportunities for Eckler in this one, and definitely a running back 3 if you need him in your fantasy football leagues. And now moving on to my final tier, tier 7. These are flex plays only if you really need them. I don't even know if we can really play most of these guys, but they are flex plays if you need them. Coming in at 31, Javonte Williams. He plays on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He did rush the ball 11 times for 17 yards in Sunday's 13-6 loss to the Steelers. He added 5 receptions on 5 targets for 48 yards, so you do like to see that. But Javonte, he's been splitting touches with Jaleel McLaughlin in a bad offense, and it is severely capping his upside. He's not really a player we can confidently start at this time unless he does see similar receiving work to what he saw last week in week 2. But even then, he still only finished as the running back 27 on the week, so somebody who is definitely just a flex play. Now, coming into my running back 32, this is where I'm going to put Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. They play on the road at the Las Vegas Raiders. Hubbard, he rushed 10 times for 64 yards, and he brought in 4 of 5 targets for 12 yards in the Panthers' 26-3 loss to the Chargers on Sunday. Week 1 was absolutely horrible for Hubbard, and he was a drop candidate going into week 2. However, he did give us an RB26 performance in week 2, and with a quarterback change in Carolina, there is hope that he at least gets some more involvement in the receiving game and maybe some more touchdown opportunities if this team improves at all. Now, coming into my running back 33, this is where I'm going to put Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott plays against the Baltimore Ravens. He rushed 9 times for 16 yards in Sunday's 44-19 loss to the Saints. He added 2 receptions on 3 targets for 16 yards as well. This Cowboys backfield, it's a full-blown committee, but Zeke, he does look like the goal line back, or at least the 1A in this backfield for the most part. It is going to be very tough to rely on Zeke in fantasy, and this week's matchup versus Baltimore should be a tough matchup for the running backs overall. Now, moving on to my running back 34, I am going to have Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He plays against the Los Angeles Chargers, and Warren, he rushed the ball 9 times for 42 yards in Sunday's 13-6 win over the Broncos. He added 2 catches on 2 targets for 19 yards, and after only seeing 31% of the snaps in week 1, Warren saw an increase to 48% of the snaps in week 2. He does look like he is fully recovered from that preseason injury, and he has resumed his role here as the complementary back to Najee Harris, and he should probably be able to perform for us as an RB3 flex play type of guy here in week 3 versus the Chargers. Now, coming in at running back 35, I do have Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They play against the Denver Broncos. Irving, he rushed 7 times for 22 yards, and he wasn't targeted during the Buccaneers' 20-16 win over the Lions on Sunday. Just like Rachaad White, Bucky Irving has been very inconsistent with his touches outside of a single 31-yard run that he had in week 1. However, he does have enough PPR upside, and it does look like he could be a fill-in for White if on the off chance that White were to miss some time this week after he did get banged up earlier last week, but it doesn't look like White's going to miss time, so he does come in for me as my running back 35. And last but not least, coming in as my running back 36, that is going to be Ty Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings. As I mentioned, they play the Houston Texans here in this one, and Chandler, he rushed 10 times for 82 yards in the Vikings' 23-17 win over the 49ers on Sunday. He was also sacked on a passing attempt, so it was kind of weird to see him do that. But Chandler, he's seen double-digit opportunities in both of the Vikings games this year, and he looks to be a complementary piece here to Aaron Jones. After posting 8.2 yards per carry in week 2 versus the Niners, going to be interesting to see if Kevin O'Connell decides to give Chandler some more carries here in week 3. So there you have it. That's my top 36 running backs here in week 3. As I mentioned, make sure if you did enjoy the content, go down, hit that like button for me. It is the best free way to show this channel some support, and also make sure you are subscribed and hitting that notification bell. That way you never miss any future content. If you missed the wide receiver version of this video earlier today, make sure you go check that out. If you want updates to these rankings throughout the week, make sure to go join the Discord. The Discord is free to join. It is linked in the description, and I'm in there helping you guys with your fantasy football teams 24/7, 365 with start sits, trades, waivers, whatever you got, I got you. That being said, I have nothing else for you guys today, so I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.